One of my favorite aspects of A Song of Ice and Fire is the way in which George R. R. Martin uses his fantasy series to criticize and talk about war and the futility of it. Now, A Song of Ice and Fire is very obviously a politically charged story. George R. R. Martin does not stray away from putting his own politics into the story that he is telling, and he is very upfront and obvious about the things that he is trying to say. And one of the most interesting aspects of his political views, and the way in which he interweaves it into his story, is the way he feels about war and the futility of all of it. George R. R. Martin has stated many times before that he is a conscientious objector and was a conscientious objector to the Vietnam War. And just in general, he finds war to be very futile and not something that is very productive. And this is something that we see constantly throughout his work, and in many instances it is truly quite reflective of our own real world. One of the most interesting aspects about war in A Song of Ice and Fire is the way in which it produces broken men. A Feast for Crows, that in the title alone, is a book dedicated to discussing the way in which wars will pick apart and destroy a land or a group of people. And there is this phenomenal speech given by Septon Merribold about halfway through the book, where he essentially explains how broken men come to be. And essentially what a broken man is a man that started off hopeful and proud and ready to fight and make a name for himself, that when faced with the reality of war, faced with watching his friends and family members be torn apart in front of him, just slowly but surely that man will erode until there is nothing left of him. And all of a sudden, years have passed, he's fought in hundreds of battles, and has lost any semblance of who he once was. And just from there, it's a quick step to raping, pillaging, and becoming everything that the man wanted to fight against at the very beginning. And this speech, and A Feast for Crows in general, is very much dedicated to showcasing the way in which war is futile. And no region in Westeros better showcases the futility and brutality of war than the Riverlands. It's almost kind of a meme in the community at this point that whenever something remotely happens on the continent, the Riverlands is just burning, even if they had nothing to do with the current conflict. But it really is true. Throughout the War of the Five Kings, the Riverlands gets torn apart by everyone and everyone. And the fact that it is everyone doing this to the Riverlands highlights a key aspect of George R. R. Martin's story. That in war, there aren't really any true good guys, and there aren't really any true victors. A really hard pill that you have to swallow as a reader is understanding that while Robb and the Starks in general are our POV characters, the cause that they are fighting for is not just through and through, and there are a bunch of northern people fighting for Robb who are downright terrible and do the exact same thing that the Lannister army does, except they just fly a different banner. And this really proves Jorah Mormont's point that he gives to Daenerys in Book 1, that the people, the small folk, don't really care who's ruling them. All they want is to have a relatively full belly, clean food, clean water, a place where their children won't combust into flames at any given moment, and just a halfway decent life, because at the end of the day, there are bad people on both sides of the equation. And no two houses in Westeros better showcase the futility and just how unnecessary war really is than the Brackens and the Blackwoods. The Brackens and the Blackwoods are these two opposing houses that are right next to one another that have been fighting for thousands of years. They are on opposite sides of nearly every single conflict. They are just itching to kill one another at all times, and the craziest part about it is neither house really knows why. Neither house can point to what actually started their beef, they just blame the other one, and there isn't any actual factual evidence to prove which house drew first blood, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. All that matters now is this is a cycle of violence that has spanned hundreds of generations of people, and no one really knows why. If you're born a Bracken, you hate the Blackwoods. If you're born a Blackwood, you hate the Brackens. Each opposing faction is taught that the other one is the root of all evil, and they must be cut out root and stem. And again, no one knows why. And one of the most interesting characters to come to this conclusion in A Feast for Crows is actually Jaime Lannister. One of the reasons Jaime's chapters in A Feast for Crows are so interesting is because we are getting a perspective on war from a man who used to love it. Jaime in Book 1 and Book 2 and parts of Book 3 talks about how fighting, battle, killing another man was the height of his life because the adrenaline rush was just so insane that he never felt more alive than when he was putting his life on the line and taking the life of someone else. But during A Feast for Crows, when he's trying to become Golden Hand the Just, and just isn't as physically capable as he once was, Jaime becomes very frustrated with the war and understands the futility of it. By the end of A Feast for Crows, he is basically burnt out from trying to solve all of these issues. He has completely shifted and now doesn't understand why people are fighting without motive, even though not too long ago he didn't need any motive to fight other than he just wanted to do it because he felt alive. Another phenomenal example of the futility of war in Westerosi history is the Dance of the Dragons. The Dance of the Dragons has to be one of the most pointless conflicts in history. This is House Targaryen at the height of its power. If they can just simply coexist, if they can be remotely peaceful, remotely normal, they would be the house in charge to the end of time. All they needed to do was not kill one another. And they killed each other and all of their dragons and dismantled the house's power. The Dance of the Dragons is one of the most pointless conflicts in all of Westerosi history. It is a family consuming itself because they are just a bunch of spoiled brats that cannot properly allocate the power that they've been given by birth. It is a pointless conflict that is never properly resolved, doesn't have any actual positive resolution, that just kills thousands of people, dismantles House Targaryen, weakens the realm, and just messes up life for everyone on the continent. And one of the reasons that these themes hit people so hard is because of the true brutality that George R. R. Martin demonstrates in his work. There are many, many chapters in A Song of Ice and Fire that are very difficult to get through because they are just so grotesque. We get very realistic and very brutal descriptions of people being tortured, people being maimed, people being burned alive, people being crushed under their horses, having to hear and feel the way in which certain bones snap, and the way a brain will squish, and the way eyes will pop out, and just the true horrors of war are laid out for the reader to see. And what makes these moments so incredibly real and impactful is the fact that they are literally based off of the real world and George R. R. Martin's friends' own lived experiences. George R. R. Martin knew a lot of people that served in Vietnam, and he talked to them in depth about their experience, about what they did, what they had done to their friends, what they saw, how they felt, all before writing A Song of Ice and Fire. So when he is giving you these grotesque battle scenes where all of this visceral gore is occurring in front of your eyes, and it's very difficult to imagine, the reason it hits you so hard is because it's real. George is not pulling this stuff out of thin air or just out of his messed up mind. These are things that he has been told and is now just putting into the series. Some of the most vile deaths in A Song of Ice and Fire are those that are related to poison. George R. R. Martin goes in depth explaining what certain poisons do, and then he will show you on page what this vile creation can do to a human being. And I personally believe, based off of what I've been told by my own relatives that served in the Vietnam War, that some of these reactions that characters have on screen when they ingest certain poisons are based off of the physical reactions people would have to ingesting or breathing in the toxins that were doused all over Vietnam at the time. And to speak more broadly, the others in general just represent the way in which people in the real world will turn a blind eye towards very real and very imposing threats for the sake of things that are futile in the short term. The others are this massive, cold wall of death that is coming for absolutely everyone and will not discriminate in their destruction. And yet, nearly every single character that we have that is noble in Song of Ice and Fire is far, far more concerned about the stupid, ugly chair than they are the giant wall of death that is coming for all of them. George R. R. Martin is many things, but subtle is not one of them. He goes very hard in trying to show the reader that war, the fight for power, the struggle to be the king at the top of the broken system is a futile endeavor, and that the true, real threats that this world is facing are being overlooked, much like the way they are in our own world. This makes A Song of Ice and Fire one of the most real and interesting examples, going over just how futile some of the things that human beings do on a daily basis truly are. With all that being said, if you've made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. By the way, to anyone wondering if I'm going to be making longer videos, I promise those are all coming over the next month. I am in final season, so it is going to be rough for the next month, I can't lie. But bear with me, I promise you'll be getting more long-form content soon, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Peace.